it's me again. Today we're going to make a simple landscape painting. Mostly we're going to focus on making a tree. Trees sometimes are a little confusing to make, so I thought I would give you a few guidelines on this. You don't need much, just a basic palette of colors. I've got two blues for the sky. This is ultramarine blue, which is kind of a little purpley, and this is phthalo blue, which is a little more turquoisey. And then I've got a dark brown, a light brown, a white, a green, and a yellow. So pretty simple palette. If you're going to use crayons or markers, you can sort of start with these kind of colors as well. The strategy would be different, but let's start with this painting and see how it goes. So we're going to do the sky first because it's in the background. Now, if you're working with your Prismacolor crayons, that's not going to help much. You're probably going to want to do the tree first, because once you saturate your paper with your crayons, there's no going back on top of it. But for us, we're going to do background elements first. So I'm not going to worry too much about my composition, but I'm going to probably want to set up the tree somewhere around here and then have the grass or the ground in that section. So I'm going to start with the sky. I'm going to go pretty loosely, and in order to be fair, I'm using printer paper that I taped to the table. Now, printer paper is something all of you have at home, so I figured then it's probably going to be an easy material for you to source inside the house, but it doesn't do very well with water. So keep your paint pretty dry, meaning don't mix it with water, and tape your paper to the table so that it doesn't start wrinkling. You're going to want to remove the tape only when you're done and your painting is 100% dry. So for now, I'm just going to build a sky. Now, to create a little bit of drama, it's interesting to have a portion of the sky that's darker and a portion that's lighter. Now, I don't know if you see what I'm doing. I'm going back and forth with my brush. I just grabbed a little water there to make it a little more slippery and blending. So that back and forth motion between the two colors allows them to mix nicely together, and you don't get this sharp edge between your dark and your light. So the other reason I put two blues on my palette, or the one reason I put two blues on my palette, is because they're so incredibly different. They make nice variation in the quality of the sky. The cat's gonna help us. He's super helpful. Right, you go. So just play with that and keep it going until your sky is done. When you're using your paintbrush, make sure that you don't repeat the same brush stroke. So turn your brush, left, right, upside down. No, not quite upside down. This will prevent you from repeating the same brush strokes over and over and over again. Okay, I don't mind my sky the way it is right now. I could spend a lot more time blending the colors, having a softer transition between all the colors, but I don't think it's a really big deal. I think it's kind of fun to see the texture of the paint brushes, or the brush strokes, I mean. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the ground. So I'm going to wash my brush a little bit. And I'm going to do a summer scene. We'll do a winter scene a bit later. But for now, I'm going to do a summer scene. Now, green is a bit of a fussy color. If you have paint at home, there's a very good chance you don't have the right green, because they come in either way too bright or way too dull, especially in the inexpensive brands of paint. So in order to give it some life, you can drag in some yellow in there. Sometimes you can also drag in the light brown. Just got to be careful that this light brown has a bit of a yellowish base, which is compatible with green. So I'm going to start putting that down. I'm going to keep in mind where my tree's going to go, because I'm going to build a little shadow under my tree. But for now, I'm just going to give it a green base everywhere. And then in a few minutes, I will lively it up by adding light and shadow. But we'll do that in a minute. Let's just put our base down for now. Now, I do realize that I paint faster than most people. So if this takes me 15 minutes to make, it's probably going to take you half an hour to an hour, depending on how meticulous you are. Some of my students are really, really meticulous, and others are okay with a little bit of chaos. They're both good, no judgment. Just go with what feels right to you. So this is the part where I'm coming in, and I'm going to add a little bit of light. So I'm kind of thinking that my light source is going to be on that side. This is something you should think about when you work on a composition, is where is the light coming from? The light gives 3 dimension to everything. If there's no light, nothing really looks 3-dimensional. It looks flat. So you always got to ask yourself, where's my light source, and how is it hitting the object, in this case the ground, and where are going to be the highlighted or the most bright areas. So I'm going to go like this. It's kind of looking like a mountain profile. It's a little aggressive, so let's soften that a little bit. Just make it a little less mountainy and a little more flat. Okay. I'm going to give myself a starting point for my tree, because I need to know where he's going to sit so I can place my shadow on the grass. So I'm going to go with the brown. It's a little bit dark. Most trees are leaning a little bit more towards gray or light brown, but you do have the occasional splash of dark. So you see how once I put it on the palette, it looks more gray than brown, which is kind of nice. I'm going to make him a little chunkier. Now, people all around the world have a different experience of tree. My tree experience is with Canadian trees. So even if I've seen trees from everywhere else around the world, in my subconscious, I see them as Canadian tree. This is the form that is embedded into my visual world. So if you're working from somewhere else and your view of a tree is different, go with it. Just, don't do what I do just because I'm doing it. Do what feels right to you. So I know where my tree's going to be. Now I want to set up a little bit of a shadow. I don't know if you've noticed, but I did not put black on my palette. don't like black. I think it's a color killer. It will just basically kill your color. So I'm going to use this phthalo blue, which is very compatible with green. And this allows me to darken my blue a little bit, or my green a little bit, so that I can get a nice shadow. I'm going to put that at the base of the tree. I'm not going to be too fussy about where it ends and where it starts, because our leaves are not going to be fussy about where they end and when they start. So I'm just going to leave it like that. Okay, basic branches. Now, there's a general rule with trees is that when you add a branch, the trunk becomes smaller. So you got to think about that when you go up. Every time you add a branch, see how I'm using this side of my brush, or the straight edge of my brush, to get this line? So when you choose your brush at home, it's nice if you pick one that's not all frayed and opened up, meaning that the bristles are very close together and you get this nice sort of straight edge that becomes a tool that you can use. So I've added a branch, which means that my trunk is going to go a little smaller right after that branch. It's almost like you've eaten a slice of the cake, so the cake is smaller. That's kind of a funny comparison, but you get what I mean. So I'm going to keep adding branches. Okay, I'm okay with this tree. Some areas bug me, like this little fat thing going on there. But this is where the leaves come in. We're going to hide anything we don't like behind leaves. So don't panic if your tree is awful, which it might be, especially if you've never painted before, because none of us are born painters. It's all about practice. So you see I'm making myself a bit of a different green. I don't want it exactly the same as what's going on down there. So I'm bringing some of that light brown in there just to make it a smidge different. But that's not mandatory. You can kind of do what you want. So I'm going to use my brush in a bit of a tip. I'm using the tip of my brush. So I'm going to put down some leaves. Now, the leaves I'm putting down, I'm spreading them, but I'm trying to stay disorganized. One of my students' biggest issue is to control their need to organize everything. And I'm sure there's someone at home thinking, oh my God, that's me. This is what I do. I over-organize everything. Nature it's got its rules, but when it comes to distributing leaves, it's not super organized. It kind of sprinkles them and they fall where they fall. The other thing that people have a tendency to do is make things even on both sides, and they don't put any leaves in front of the trunk. Put leaves in front of your branches, not just all around them. So I don't mind this base. Now I'm going to go with more of a shadowy color. So I know my light source is coming from here. So I'm going to kind of go a little darker on this side and under whatever clumps I've created. Okay, now I'm actually going to go a little bit lighter where the light is hitting the leaves or the tree. So I'm going to kind of sprinkle some light leaves. So those are the little guys that are catching the sun. So you basically keep doing that until you're happy with the amount of leaves you have. Right now I'm feeling my tree is a little undernourished. So I'm just going to keep adding a few leaves. You probably noticed that I did not put my tree in the center. That was intentional. Our minds are funny that way. We like, when it comes to visual, we like things in odd numbers, and we don't specifically like things being too centered. So when you're planning a painting, plan to, if possible, not keep your main subject in the center, and do it with intention. Don't put him like 2 millimeters off center. Put it like 3 inches off center, where your eye is not wondering, is that centered or is that not centered? You know, your mind almost needs a clear answer. Okay, this is very clear. This tree is not in the center, and I'm very peaceful with that. Okay, I feel like my 30-minute painting is done. You could add some birds if you want to, flying in the sky in the back, or you could add some little trees in the background, like far away. But for a 30-minute exercise, I think that you guys might be okay with that level of finish. One thing I'm going to do, because I keep thinking about light source, I'm actually going to add a little bit of a shadow on this side of the tree. And see how I'm using again the edge of my brush, the straight edge. So now I have a tree that is in the shade on the left side. I'll shade in the leaves, won't kill us either. Okay. Let's call it done. When it's dry, I'll take the tape off and show you. Our painting is dry and it's looking okay. So we're going to remove the tape. And removing tape is not as straightforward as you might think, especially when you're using printer paper, which is pretty vulnerable. So I always like to start in a corner and peel slowly and sort of move away from the painting. You don't want to do any jerky, fast movement, because if it starts ripping, you want to be able to stop it and control it. So just a gentle outward movement all the way across. It doesn't hurt to hold the paper. It encourages to separate right at the seam rather than pull on everything. So we're gonna do this all the way. Now you could have placed your your tape to have a bit of a border. In this case, I didn't do that. I didn't leave a border. I might do that next time. But this is what we get. And I think for a few minutes of work, that is not too bad. I'll put out more videos very soon, so keep in touch.